Azul DevRel Espresso, brewed for Java minds.
Hi there. So today I have another session for you, and today it's all about the TCK and everything that is related to that, because not everybody knows what it means, and so I thought it might be a good idea to give you some little background about this topic. So the TCK means Technology Compatibility Kit. But before we start, my name is Gerrit Grunwald. I'm working for Azul as a senior developer advocate. And yeah, let's dive into TCK. But before we go there, let's also take a look at the JCP, the JSR, and the JEP, because this is everything somehow related to each other, and it doesn't really hurt to know more about it. So let's start with the JCP. This is the Java community process. And if you have no idea what it is, then welcome to the club, right? Because not everybody knows what it is, and it's a quite old process, which absolutely makes sense. So let's dive into it. So what is it? What is the JCP, the Java Community Process? So it's a standardized process for develop and evolve the Java platform. And this is, you have to let that sink in a little bit, because that means really this process is somehow responsible for develop and evolve the Java platform. And that's a quite powerful process, right? So that means it involves the Java community to participate in the development of the Java platform. So you as a community member can participate in developing the Java platform, which is quite powerful. It's not with every language like this, right? But this is a really nice process. So it provides a framework for proposing and developing new features and technologies for the Java platform. So there is a formal process that you have to follow if you would like to implement something into develop something for the Java platform. And it helps to ensure compatibility and stability across different implementations and platforms. Right. So there is a little chart that gives you an overview of the process. So it starts, the whole the JCP process starts with the initiation. And the first thing is there's a JSR review. And the JSR I will talk about in a second, which is the Java specification request. So it will be filed, and then it takes two to 4 weeks to review it for the first time. And then there is a JSR approval ballot. There's a voting of the executive committee. And then they will form an expert group for this specific request, right? It takes around 7 days. And then before it gets into a draft development, right? So that there's a group of experts which is now formed, and they develop a progressive draft of the specification. So, right, so you have an idea, you put it into a JSR, and then there will be an expert group. They create a draft, and then once they finish the draft and internally take it as a good one, they put it into public, and then the community can review this draft, right? And then that takes 30 to 90 days. And then they take the feedback of the community and create or rework it into the final proposal for the request, for the specification request. So we have this public review final approval ballot, and this is around 7 days it takes to do that. So and then we have a final release of the specification. And then in the end, it gets into maintenance mode. And that means the maintenance review is 14 to 13 days. And then there's another voting from the executive committee of the JCP process. And it takes another 7 days. And then it is officially in maintenance mode, the JSR. So I already mentioned the JSR, and this is probably something we also would like to look into, right? So the JSR is the Java specification request. So that means if you have an idea with a group of people that you would like to change something in the JDK, then you have to create a JSR. And so the first question is, okay, what is it, right? So it's a request for new modification of an existing, either a new one or a modification for an existing specification in the Java platform. So it it is part of the Java community process, as we saw. It's used in this process of the JCP. And the process is a process to define and extend new standards of Java or the Java runtime environment. So it's created to include new language elements or extend an API, as already mentioned. So if you have that idea, you usually try to find people that agree to these changes that you propose. Then you create a JSR, you propose it to the JCP, you form an expert group, and then you follow this whole procedure that we saw. Okay. And a JSR, like I said, is led by a team of experts, right? Usually from the industry or from research and development. It depends. Can also be a mixture of both. Then in the last couple of years, we heard a lot about the JEP, right? Because in the former days, it was only JSRs, right? You heard about the JSR and you heard about the JCP. And then suddenly we heard about JEPs. So what is a JEP, right? It's the JDK Enhancement Proposal, right? This is another process which is also it's a process drafted by Oracle for collecting proposals for enhancement to the Java Development Kit. So in principle, that's an idea of Oracle to make it easier for the community to propose changes in the JDK without going through the JSR process first, right? So it's an informal process. So it serves as the long-term roadmap for the Java Development Kit release projects, right? So it does not replace the JCP. So the JCP still has the final word in what is coming into the JDK and whatnot. So this is really an informally process that becomes a formal JSR request once it's done, right? Once it's finished. But it's easier to involve the community into the development of such a JEP. And that was one of the reasons why this was established by Oracle. Okay, now we saw the JCP, the JSR, the JEP, and that finally leads us to the TCK, right? As already mentioned in the beginning, it's the Technology Compatibility Kit. And again, the question is, what is it? It's a quite important thing. It was originally developed by Sun Microsystems, and now it's the intellectual property and licensed by Oracle. It contains, for example, for JDK 11, it contains more than 120,000 individual tests. So the idea is we have a specification for Java, right? But how to make sure that the implementation of Java, the language, for example, is exactly like it should be. So you need tests to do all these kind of things, right? To test if the implementation of a string is the same on Windows as it is on Mac, as it is on Linux, right? So this is the reason why we have this huge testing kit. And these tests are defined in the Java Compatibility Kit. So sometimes you read about, oh, it's JCK compliant or it's TCK compliant. In the end, they mean the same because the actual tests are in the JCK, which is part of the TCK. This is the main idea. So that means if we take a look at the JCK, which is the Java Compatibility Kit, which is part of the TCK, then again, the question arises, what is it, right? So yeah, like already mentioned, it tests features that are likely to differ across implementations, right? Or that rely on hardware or operating system specific behavior. That are difficult to port, right? If you have features that are difficult to port, then you need tests to make sure that it really works on all these different ports. They mask or abstract hardware behavior, right? So if you have specific features that mask or abstract hardware behavior, then you need to test that. And the same is true for operating system behaviors, right? So because we know that Windows is not Mac, is not Linux. So if you have specific operating system behavior that is abstracted, then you have to make sure that it works on all these platforms. And therefore you need tests. And this is all covered by the JCK. So, okay, now if I'm now use the OpenJDK project source code to build my own distribution of OpenJDK, and I would like to test it to make sure that it really is compliant to the TCK, can I do that? Yes, you can. because the JCK, you can access it and it's available at no charge. But I have to say but, because it's some paperwork involved here. You must meet the terms of the OCTLA, which is the OpenJDK Community TCK License Agreement. Wow, what a word. So that means you have to sign this OCTLA to be able to get access to the JCK. And you must, in addition, you also have to sign the OCA, which is the Oracle Contributor Agreement. Once you do that, you can get access to the JCK. That means to the actual testing suite to test your build of OpenJDK and make sure it's compatible and compliant to the TCK. So if you would like to know more about it, you can scan this QR code that you see here and it will lead you to the page where you can get access to the JCK. Okay? Question is, who is compliant, right? And why is it important at all? Well, maybe let's talk about first about why is it important to be compliant to the TCK. And there are different reasons. So usually a company or a group of people take the OpenJDK source code and build it. Easy. This is exactly the code that is in the repository. That's fine, right? So should work, and you probably can run through all the tests, which will take a long time, to make sure it is compliant to the TCK. Okay, but now companies tend to add functionalities to the OpenJDK source code. The reason is, for example, if you're a cloud provider, you would like to have specific features in the OpenJDK that's specific for your cloud environment. But to make sure that you are still compliant to the TCK and pass all the tests you have to run through the JCK test suite. And why is that important? It is important because if you, for example, don't use this specific vendor-specific OpenJDK build, but you use another one, then you would like to have your code run on your own machine in the same way as it runs in the cloud environment on the other OpenJDK distribution, right? It's a way to make sure that you can exchange distributions, right? This is one of the reasons why it is important to really be compliant to the TCK. The other thing is, if you add features to the OpenJDK source code that won't pass the test, that means your software might fail, right? And this is, you don't want to have your application fail just because some OpenJDK provider just adds some code that breaks your code, right? So this is the reason why it's very important to really be compliant to the TCK. So and let's take a look at the distributions that are out there that are compliant to the TCK. And if we take a look at distributions at JDK 8, then you see this list. And you see it's a quite big list. Like we have Bisheng, which is from Huawei. And then we have Corrado, which is AWS or Amazon. Dragonwell from Aladdin. And then we have Liberica, Oracle JDK, Oracle OpenJDK, which is not the same as Oracle JDK. We have Red Hat, SAP Machine, Tamarin, Azul Zulu, and Azul Zing. Right? These distributions are all TCK compliant in JDK 8. So why do I make a difference here? Because now when we take a look at distributions from JDK 9 plus, so the modular version, then you see, oh, suddenly, first of all, we see more distributions that are compliant to JDK 9 plus, but you also see two distributions that are not compliant, right? Which is Bisheng and Dragonwell. So that means this is probably not a problem in the Western world, but in Asia, for example, if you're on Dragonwell JDK 8, it is TCK compliant. If you move, for example, to JDK 11 or JDK 17 and stick to Dragonwell, it is not TCK compliant. So that means there might be something that breaks your code, right? So this is the reason why you have to be careful with this TCK compliant JDK distributions. But as you can see, most of the big ones are all TCK compliant. So which is a good thing. It means you can exchange these JDKs and you won't have any problems there. So the conclusion here is the TCK is used to test implementations of a final JSR first of all. And the JCK, which is part of the TCK, is an extensive test suite to test your build of OpenJDK against this test suite to make sure it is compliant to the TCK. And it ensures the compatibility of builds with the Java SE standard, right, which is very important. Compliance is important because it assures that your code works, right? So that not a feature of a vendor breaks your code. And of course, it is also important to make sure you can move to another TCK compliant OpenJDK distribution, like for example, Azul Zulu or Azul Zing, right? So if you would like to move away from Oracle JDK, it's no problem to move to Azul Zing, right? Because this is both are TCK compliant, so you can just move from Oracle to Azure without any problems. And with this, I'm done for today and say see you next time. Bye-bye.